I love it when this happens. I get something in, it sits in the box, not super excited about doing a video on it, but then I actually use it, and my mind is blown. Today we're talking about the PSB Alpha P3s and why it's my endgame desktop speaker. Man, this one has made the rounds. Sometimes these review units I get in are a little bit beat up. I don't know if I've ever seen one quite this beat up. These are coming in at $249 a pair, which is great. Mine are in walnut. It looks like they also come in black ash. Frequency response rated from 57 hertz all the way up to 21,000 hertz. These have a sensitivity of 87 dB, which is surprisingly high for a speaker of this size, and I think it plays a role in just how good these sound. But make sure you watch to the end of the video because I'm going to talk about the best amps to pair with this speaker. 3/4 inch anodized aluminum dome tweeter, 4-inch textured polypropylene woofer with a rubber surround. It's good that it's a rubber surround and not made from taffy. It's ported on the back, got 5-way binding posts and a threaded insert just in case you want to mount these to the wall. I was a little bit worried when these came in that they were going to be more expensive because $249 I think is at the top end of what I would be comfortable spending on a desktop speaker, and anything more than that gives me a bit of anxiety. Speaking of anxiety, it's a great segue to today's sponsor, BetterHelp. If you're facing stress, anxiety, or feeling low, then please listen up to today's sponsor. We all get stressed out, and if you're having these feelings and you're hoping that they'll just go away, usually they don't. And not dealing with them makes it worse in the long run. The truth is, most of us haven't been taught how to handle these emotions. I know I wasn't. And a lot of people believe that therapy is just for people that have like severe mental disorders, and that's not the truth at all. And if people believe that, you struggle alone and just think it's normal. That's why I'm thrilled to have BetterHelp sponsor today's video. They have an incredible, effective approach which has helped over 4 million people lead a happier and healthier life. So here's how it works. You go to betterhelp.com/cheapaudioman. You answer a few questions, and then you're going to be matched with a licensed therapist specializing with your specific struggles, often within 48 hours. I can vouch for therapy. When I was transitioning from military life to civilian life, it was tough. And being a guy from the Midwest, I had never really talked about my feelings. But spending time with a therapist was the best thing that's ever happened to me. And I still do therapy at least once a week to this day. Most of us haven't been taught the tools, the skills to deal with our emotions in a positive way. So what therapy has done for me is help me understand and cope with those feelings and create a strategy that's going to help me moving forward in my life. It's not just something that's innate. This is a learned skill, and the only way that I learned it is through therapy. And BetterHelp can offer the same opportunity for you. You can speak to a professional with years of experience, and you don't have to worry about talking to friends or family. Maybe there's things that you don't feel comfortable with talking to friends or family. It's a step towards regaining control of your life. And you can do it through your phone or your computer, calls, video calls, or even just messaging. You don't have anything to lose, so go to betterhelp.com/cheapaudioman. You get 10% off your first month if you use my link. You know, it's funny, therapy is not just for clinical issues, and it's something that I wish I would have done early on in life. But seeing a therapist and learning how to live life on life's terms has been the best thing for me. So go to betterhelp.com/cheapaudioman and get started today. This is how big the Alpha P3 is compared to my Rocktopus. This is how big it is compared to my Screaming Goat button. This is how big it is compared to a Rubik's Cube and a sheet of paper. Number one, we can't talk about sound without talking about sound stage, because whether you want to admit it or not, soundstage and sonics together are what gives us the total experience when it comes to a speaker. The cool thing about desktop speakers is you usually can get up in them, which makes soundstage big. So most desktop speakers can soundstage an image well, simply because of the placement of ourselves within the soundstage. With a little bit of balance control, I was able to get a beautiful, deep soundstage with these. And depending upon the amp that you have, and depending upon the op amps that you have within said amp, you can get even better soundstage. So check out my video when I talked about hacking your amp. Most of the small speakers that I've had in the house lack one thing, and that's bass. You get bass from a big cabinet, you get bass from a big woofer. But you can also get bass from a speaker when you have a gifted speaker designer. And the Alpha P3s absolutely blew me away on how much bass came out of these. I've had other speakers in here that have a lot of bass in a small package. Usually those speakers are like 83 dB though, and you need a ton of power. But the P3s were able to give me a lot of bass punch even at lower volumes. Another reason why I love these, because who wants to listen to their desktop speakers at deafening volumes just to get a little bit of bass punch? I usually listen between 60 to 70, really 60 to 70 dB when I'm at my desk. And having a speaker be dynamic at lower volumes is very important for me. Now there is a bunch of tuning going on in this speaker. And since you get a lot of bass punch, there's a lot of warmth in the lower mid-range, and there is a bit of mid-range detail loss. So with acoustic guitars, the reverb hanging out, with some male vocals, there's a little bit covered up. So when you're dealing with something of this size, there's gonna be certain sacrifices made. When you're dealing with a speaker of any size, usually there's certain sacrifices made. But what I lose in mid-range detail, I gain back in dynamics and the overall experience. Top end is surprisingly detailed. Cymbals sound like cymbals. With an aluminum dome tweeter, a lot of times I feel like there's a push forward in the upper mid-range. I didn't feel that at all with the Alpha P3s. It's a more relaxed top end, but with the aluminum dome at lower volumes, I feel like there's more top end action going on with the P3 versus a very good speaker, the ELAC BS41. And at lower volumes, I prefer the Alpha P3. I compared this to the Jammo S801s. I compared it to the Mica RB42X Gen 2. I compared this to the ELAC BS41. And the PSB Alpha P3s for me was my favorite speaker. At $250, you're getting the vibe from the more expensive PSB Imagine XB speaker that came in at $600. At less than half the price. At $250, this speaker gets everything right for me. Number one, the size is right. Two, the price is right. You can get an AIMA A07 Max and a Weem Mini all coming in under $400. If you're using your computer as your source, you can switch out the Weem for an SU1, still coming in around $400. Then you can roll the op amps. The cool thing is, I don't feel like I need a subwoofer. Now, if you're looking for neutrality, this isn't it. If you're looking for a speaker that gives me everything that I want from the bottom end, which is really where all these desktop speakers fall off. I don't know what PSB is doing, but I've heard it on the PSB Imagine XB, so I know they know what they're doing when it comes to getting the most bass out of the smallest form factor. And even though the finishing isn't great on these speakers, just a vinyl wrap does come with a black baffle though, which is kind of cool. There's some cool touches from a design standpoint, but as you can see here, you might want to leave them on your desk. It's kind of like IKEA furniture. Looks good if you leave it in place, but you start moving it around a bunch, you're going to start to see the flaws in the build quality. Amp pairings, well, being price appropriate, I think the obvious amp pairing would be the Fuzzy Audio ZA3 or the AIMA A07 Max. Even some older Class D stuff from SMSL and Topping is actually going to do great on the PA3s. If you're after something a little bit more traditional, the Yamaha AS301 comes in around $350, would also be a good pairing. Basically, you don't need to worry if your amp is a little bit thin on the bottom. Comparing it to the Yamaha S801s, these are actually very affordable. Sometimes you can get them in a package with the 803s and the center speaker for $230. But you can almost always find these for $99 a pair or less. Listening to the Lumineers Ho Hey, or is it Hey Ho? Yeah, I was right. Ho Hey. There's tambourine and cymbals, much more prominent with this big tweeter, but it doesn't mean it was better. PSB's was way more natural. This seemed a little bit harsh in comparison. The Mica MB42X Gen 2 is trying to pull off a bit of the same PSB trick, but doesn't do it nearly as well. There's a lot of bloat in the bass and lower mid-range on this speaker, but none of the refinement of the PSB Alpha P3. Not to say that this is a bad speaker. It's coming in around $99, but it just can't compete with the PSB. The biggest surprise out of the comparison was with the ELAC BS41s. PSBs actually had tighter, more refined bass. And I always thought this speaker kind of stood on its own when it came to a lower mid-range bass focused affordable speaker. But once again, everything that's good about the BS41, the PSB just did better in a smaller package. Granted, these are $100 cheaper, and the differences between the PSB and the ELAC pretty small, but they were there. Couldn't recommend this speaker high enough. It's a little bit more caramelly. It's a little, I wouldn't call it rolled off, but the top end is definitely not the star of the show. Frankly, for an aluminum dome tweeter, sounds spectacular. If you're in the market for a desktop speaker, take a look at the PSB Alpha P3. For me, it's my end game desktop speaker. So if you want to support the channel, you can sign up for Patreon. Patreon.com/cheapaudioman. Every Sunday night when Peter only zooms. You can use the links in the description, which means if you buy the PSB Alpha P3, I'll get a commission, but it won't cost you anymore, so it's a great way to support the channel. You can also buy me a cup of coffee. Down at the bottom of the video, there's a thanks button. But don't feel compelled to buy me anything. If you got any value out of this, give this video a thumbs up, maybe subscribe. So don't binge watch anything on Netflix or Hulu. Binge listen maybe through your new PSB Alpha P3s and fill your soul with happiness. And with that, I'm Randy. I'm the Cheap Audio Man.